بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين بارئ الخلائق أجمعين باعث الأنبياء والمرسلين ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء وسيد المرسلين حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد وعلى آله الطاهرين المعصومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
واللعنة الدائمة على أعدائهم إلى قيامة يوم الدين. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله. السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله. يا غريب كربلاء، رزقنا الله في الدنيا زيارتكم وشفاعتكم في الدنيا وفي القبر وفي الآخرة. أما بعد، فقد قال الله في محكم كتابه وقرآنه المجيد وقوله الحق: أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وجاء من أقصى المدينة رجل يسعى قال يا قوم اتبعوا المرسلين، اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا وهم مهتدون. وما لي لا أعبد الذي فطرني وإليه ترجعون. أأتخذ من دونه آلهة إن يردني الرحمن بضر لا تغن عني شفاعتهم شيئا ولا ينقذون. إني إذا لفي ضلال مبين. إني آمنت بربكم فاسمعون. قيل ادخل الجنة قال يا ليت قومي يعلمون بما غفر لي ربي وجعلني من المكرمين. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Respected brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Imam al-Husayn's tragedy is one that reverberates through every single year, every single generation, and every single country, time, and place. Yet when we are asked by our fellow Muslims, when will you stop crying, there are many different answers, especially because in the minds of so many, the killers of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam have passed away or been killed, or some kind of justice has been dealt to them. Indeed, when you look at the other schools of thought, there's much curiosity when it comes to our commemoration of Imam al-Husayn each and every single year. Like clockwork, whether they know that Muharram has come or not, once they see that the Shi'as are mourning and they are wearing black, they know that that time of year has come. And whether they are religious or not, they know that it's that time. So tonight, inshallah, I would like to look at what our role is, so that we're not just here mourning, what can we actively do? And what happened in history and what will happen in the future. In our history, not 5 years after the tragic massacre at Karbala of Imam Hussein and his entire progeny, the capture of his women, the parading of his family from city to city, burning of their tents. 5 years after, there is a mausoleum, there is a shrine, there is a qubba over his dome. And that is set up by a personality known as Mukhtar al-Thaqafi. Mukhtar, when Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam was the Imam of the time, he was not the most active, but when push came to shove, he did show some activism and he did serve his Imam as he was requested to. But he still had some doubts. And you find that in our current generation, and perhaps not as well known to us in previous generations from some of our great scholars, the personality of Mukhtar had always been in one way or another, in some way or another, under question. Now, was he someone under the influence of politics? Was he trying just to go and get his own power, his own rulership? Because when you look at his dawla, he didn't do what, for example, Muawiyah II, the son of Yazid, what he did. He said, my father was a crook and a drunkard. My grandfather was a crook and a drunkard. I do not belong here. Zain al-Abidin Medina, we need to bring him here. He should be the ruler of the Muslims. Of course, he didn't last too long because in our Machiavellian world of politics, if you already are part of a ruling dynasty, this is not the sign of a dynasty in decline. This is just, oh, it's my turn now. And so one mal'oon by the name of Marwan ibn al-Hakam, either himself or through some henchman that he has as a hired hand, orders the assassination of the then Khalifa, this young boy Muawiyah II. Right? And so some people will come and say that Mukhtar did not give over the rulership to the Imam of his time. Some will even come and question, was he even a follower of the correct Imam of his time? Was he a follower of Imam Zain al-Abidin والسلام, or was he a follower of the Kaysaniya sect, known as the followers of Muhammad ibn Hanafiya? So there's a lot of questions surrounding Mukhtar, and in our recent times, not only have our grand Maraja offered their own opinions, whether for or against, there's also been recently an Iranian TV show within the last decade or so by the name of Mukhtar Nameh. And this series paints Mukhtar in a very positive light, and it encouraged many people to go and do further research. And while there are hadith on both sides that seem to praise, that seem to denigrate, that's not the focus of my majlis tonight. My focus, first and foremost, with regards to Mukhtar, is what did he do when he was given power? You find that every single person on the 10th of Muharram that drove some kind of an emotional or physical or mental dagger into the heart of Fatima al-Zahra through her son, al-Imam al-Hussein, or the rest of his family present. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. One by one, as they were found, they were taken care of in their own special methods by al-Mukhtar al-Thaqafi. You find that, for example, the 10 horse riders, only 10 people, by the way, that day, out of the tens of thousands present that day on Ashura, 10 people from illegitimate birth were the only ones who volunteered. Alaykum as-salam wa rahmatullah. 10 people were the only ones who volunteered to sharpen their hooves after Imam al-Hussein had died. And Umar ibn Sa'ad gave the command, O horse riders, trample the body of Aba Abdullah. 10 people. What does Mukhtar do with them, for example? We find that he has them stripped of their clothes, similar to how Imam al-Hussein ended up. All he had left on him were some torn pajamas that he would wear at home. Things that you would not, in that generation or this generation, go outside with. They're not your outside clothes. But he tears these up, hoping that his dignity is preserved. Mukhtar does not give them that same treatment. He takes completely their clothes off, and first he has them dragged through Kufa. Because he is in power where? Is he in power in Medina? Is he in power in Mecca? He's in power in Kufa. And so after he has that done, then he has them similarly trampled by horses. And that is how they died. One might be wondering, how exactly do others meet their end? Those who were the oppressors of Imam al-Hussein. And while there are many stories, one story that comes to mind right now is something that is known amongst the ulama, but perhaps not as known amongst the regular people. And so I'd like to tell you this story. There are a few theories, because at the end of the day, the actual perpetrator is not Shimr ibn al-Jawshan, it's not Umar ibn Sa'ad, it's not Ibn Ziyad. Who is the actual perpetrator of the events that occurred on the 10th of Muharram? At the end of the day, all of the green lights were given by one person in Sham, known as Yazid ibn Muawiyah. Without him, none of these pieces would have been put in place. What happens to Yazid ibn Muawiyah? Because we see that Shimr, okay, he's killed. Umar ibn Sa'ad killed in his bed. As Imam al-Hussein predicted, Harmala is found by Mukhtar and killed personally by Mukhtar. What happens to Yazid ibn Muawiyah? Because, brothers and sisters, as for the grave of Muawiyah, it seems to have been found, and it was known. And in fact, at the time of Banu Abbas, Muawiyah, under the khilafahs of some rulers, was not as well liked. So one of these Abbasi Khalifas says, I need to go and find the grave of this person, this mal'oon, Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan. And he finds his church where he's buried in. And what does he do then? He goes and opens up the grave. But he says, it looks like someone got to him before me. Why? Because his body is completely burnt. It's like a burnt body. What would a burnt body look like? Right? For those of you who watch TV shows that have like crime scenes and whatever, use your imagination. Muawiyah, someone already got to him first, before this Khalifa of the Abbasids. What happened? Well, the running theory is that, amongst the ulama, that the punishment of the barzakh, because what happens in barzakh to Fir'aun? That morning and evening, bukratan wa ashiyya, that he is being exposed to the fire, Fir'aun. وَيَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ يُرَدُّونَ إِلَى أَشَدِّ الْعَذَابِ. This is in Surah Al-Qasas. So meaning there's a fire in where? Barzakh. It seems that this fire has gotten so much to him, it has burned him so much that it's starting to show physical effects. And this Khalifa was around the time of Imam Mhadi. So we're talking about around the time of Al-Mutawakkil, etc. So while his grave is known, Yazid's is not so well known. And And there are a couple of different theories. I'll start with probably the most well-known, and I'll finish with the most interesting, the one that I tend to favor a little bit more. What's the first one? The first one is that Yazid went hunting and he just never came back. He was killed by whatever animal he was hunting. If it was a pig slash boar, it got him in one of his tusks. If it was a deer or an antelope or whatever, the ones with the horns, it got him with his horns. Whatever the case is, that this theory is that he went out hunting and he just didn't come back. That's the end of Yazid. That's one theory. The second theory is that after having perpetrated 2 more crimes, because remember, Yazid's Khilafah was only about 3 years. He first and foremost attacks Al-Muhammad at Karbala. The second thing he does is he desecrates the Prophet's mosque and his city. The third thing is when the son of Zubayr, Abdullah ibn Zubayr, is sitting in Mecca and he is becoming rebellious, Yazid sends his soldiers to Mecca to do what? To go and burn down the Kaaba. He goes and has catapults, lights these catapults on fire and launches them at the Kaaba. Mukhtar al-Thaqafi was there at that time because the way how he was able to maneuver his way into a political opportunity is through the Zubayrids. And so he's there in Mecca at the time, and Abdullah ibn Zubayr is saying, good, let the Kaaba burn, let the people see how this opponent of mine, this political opponent of mine, Yazid, let's let the people see how he really is, so that people will come and do bay'ah to me. Allahu Akbar. This is the alternative that we have after Imam al-Hussein is gone to Yazid. People of the likes of Abdullah ibn Zubayr, where he's saying, yes, let the Kaaba burn, so that people know. Very few people, Mukhtar among them, tried to go and put out this fire. But afterwards, what happens to Yazid? We've already gone through one theory, which is that he went out hunting and didn't come back. The second theory is that he knows that he's not going to be able to survive this politically, and so he changes his name and he goes and lives in some foreign land, and that's how he dies. He just lives in some foreign country, not in power, completely unknown, and he just lives out the rest of his days in that manner. The third theory is that he tried to do that. He tried to go and change his name, but when he got on his horse, he went and started riding out of the city confines, and he encounters a man. And this man, he's in the desert, of course, and now he's not got many provisions with him. He probably leaves at the middle of the night or something, so he's, probably trying to escape an assassination or something of that nature. And he encounters this old man. And this old man, he goes and asks him for some water. Subhanallah, what did Imam al-Hussein promise when he was in his final moments at Karbala? He said, if anyone brings me water, I promise I will give them shafa'ah. Who's left? Ask yourselves, are any of the companions of Imam Hussein left? Or is it only these thugs of Yazid who are left? And he's willing to give them shafa'ah just for water? So, he asks for water. This old man asks the former Khalifa, what's your name? And he's thinking, well, I do have a new name for myself, but this old man, I think I can take him. Who's he going to tell? Maybe he doesn't even know who I am. So he goes and says, my name is Yazid. He says, Yazid, the son of who? He says, Yazid ibn Muawiyah. He says, Muawiyah, the son of who? He says, Abu Sufyan. The man becomes very, very quiet. And when he starts talking again, he says, you're the Yazid ibn Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan who killed the grandson of the Prophet. He died thirsty and I'm supposed to give you water? Never. And he slaps the horse from the behind basically making it start running. Yazid's foot was not completely in the saddle. It seems that he was trying to get down or something and the horse just started to go. This is theory number 3, by the way. And he ends up becoming dislodged from the horse. The horse keeps on running and it drags him until he dies. That's the third theory. The final theory, brothers and sisters, that I'll share with you is similar to the other two, that Yazid was trying to escape. And this, like I said a few minutes ago, is the one that I personally tend to favor. This theory says that Yazid was trying to escape under an alibi, under a different name, and he got out of the palace, so he got out of Sham. But then, in that same Sham area, he became thirsty, and then he just started going in circles and circles and circles, never able to find water. Similar to how the ayah of the Quran says, like a dog with its tongue panting out. If you give it water, it still doesn't appreciate anything, right? And similar to Bani Israel in the Quran. What do you think Bani Israel, when they were in those 40 years and they were wandering in the desert, what was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doing to them? They were right in the neighborhood of the Holy Land. They could have just, instead of taking a right turn every time, they could have, for example, just walked in. But an entire generation dies, and then the next generation of Bani Israel comes, and then they go and conquer this land. With not even Musa alayhi salam, with Yusha bin Nun. Similarly, it seems, in this theory, Yazid is just allowed by Allah to just keep on living and living and living until Yawmina Hadha, until the current present day. Still just wandering, asking for water. And a Sheikh from Lebanon, who I won't mention his name, he mentions, I did see him. It seems that from the history books, his description was met. He was in the area, of course, Lebanon, right? Sham is part, of that. And I saw him, and he was just walking around in circles, and I was very, very far away. I just kept on getting farther and farther away, and he was just asking for water, al-atash, al-atash. Allah doesn't even give him, in this theory, so much rahmah that he can be put out of his misery. He can't even die. He's just in this constant state of torture. And so you can probably see why I tend to favor this theory, where, fine, Imam al-Hussein was eventually put out of his misery, but someone like this should never be given even an ounce of rahmah. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Excepting for the love of Imam al-Hussein. And so after Mukhtar takes care of all of these people, 30,000, if the conservative numbers are to be believed, then 30,000 people, one by one, each one is dealt with in a manner that corresponds with how they dealt with Imam Hussein. Which then brings me to the question. When we say phrases like عظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بمصابنا أبي عبد الله الحسين وجعلنا وإياكم من الطالبين بثأره مع إمام المؤيد المنصور المهدي من آل محمد صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. What does this mean? وجعلنا من الثأره, right? That we make us amongst the Avengers of Imam al-Hussein. What does this mean then? What is there left for Imam al-Hussein's revenge to be taken in 2022? In whatever year we are given the tawfiq, inshallah, to see the Imam of our time. What is there that's left? You see, while Mukhtar took some steps, he did take revenge on those certain people, We have to go back a few lectures where I said that under certain circumstances, there will always be certain people who will try to take power for themselves. There will always be people who try to oppress for their own gains. There will always be someone of this nature. And so dhulm, as Rasulullah said, is so latent in this world. But when my son, the Mahdi, comes, he will fill it with justice, just as it once was filled with injustice. Why is it filled with injustice? Right now, is it filled with injustice here in these four walls? Let's try to take it literally for a second, brothers and sisters. No. Nothing is unjust being done over here. We're not going to talk about the parking lot situation where people are boxing each other in and you can't leave after the English Majlis, but that's a separate situation. But there's no true dhulm being done. So what is there that's left in 2022 or 23 or 27 or 30? What's left? How is that dhulm still present? I'll tell you how. Because we are allowing such situations to exist where people can oppress others. We are seeing it happen every day where we all want to get a little bit more rizq, but we don't realize that this is probably taking away from somebody else's. When we, for example, when we vote, and we vote for, let's say, minimum wage. Right? Minimum wage is a very popular slogan. $15 for minimum wage, $20. Why not $1 million for minimum wage? What you'll never see two politicians campaigning for at the same time is more jobs and minimum wage. You can't be an intellectual politician and argue for both. You either argue for more jobs or you argue for minimum wage. But when you increase the minimum wage, small business owners, even the bigger corporations, they're not going to be able to hire as much as they were able to hire previously. It takes a little bit of thought, but when you advocate for things that sound nice, we want a livable wage, we want to, okay, calm down, let's discuss. Instead of shouting slogans at me, how about we just sit down over a cup of chai and we'll just discuss. What are the pros and cons of this? But we don't want to think about that. We like platitudes. We just go out into the world saying things that we think make sense, and then as soon as someone questions us, oh, you must be someone who hates people who are poor. If you want more jobs, you're going to have to be able to take a job that is less payment. It's a job still, right? But this is what happens when we're not educated in basic economics. When there's a floor, artificially, this is going to create less jobs, right? When we go out and we do these things, when we create situations like this, now there is dhulm. Now when the person down the street cannot afford a slice of bread, then whose fault is that? Is that the person sitting in power? They always had these views. Or is it us who empower and enable these people? I'll give you a story. And this is something that happened last year to a dear friend of ours. It was in Iran, and he was supposed to come back, having done the ziyarah of Imam Ali ibn Musa, and what happens? He catches COVID. And now he's not able to leave the country. So I mean, now he has to go and do 14 days quarantine, right? Back then it was 14 days. Now maybe it's 7, maybe whatever. But you definitely can't board a plane, not with a positive diagnosis. In order to board a plane, you need a negative. So what does he do? He goes back to his hotel room and he waits. And what his habit was, because unfortunately in Iran right now, the situation is such that there's so much poverty that they blame the government. And so anybody who's wearing garbs like these or has an amama, they blame them. Not everybody, but a lot of people are blaming the ulama class. And this is not something that I've heard from one person. This is from multiple people. That ulamas just don't have the same amount of respect amongst the common people like they once used to. It's a sad situation, and we feel for our brothers and sisters in Iran, and may Allah improve the situation for them soon, inshallah. But what his habit was he used to convert. He's an alim ad-din. So he will go out into the streets at 8 a.m. in the morning wearing his aba, wearing his amama, and he'll convert about $800 American every day, and he'll walk into the streets with bags of Iranian riyals. And he'll just, whoever wants to come down this street, and his hotel is like, it's right down the street from Imam Rida. So there's plenty of people who are there in front of Imam Rida. So he ends up building a reputation in the few, like 1 week, 2 weeks that he's there for ziyarah, and he does this daily. And so eventually he ends up kind of going a little bit into debt every day. Like, sorry, come back tomorrow, inshallah, I'll give you two, right? Just be here a little bit early because I can't control, it's first come, first serve. I'm not going to say no to someone. Haram, they also need. He finishes this first day, or one of these days after he gets his COVID positive result. And what does he do? He goes and finishes the money. This is his morning routine. Now he's on his way to Imam Rida alayhi salam. And there's this roundabout where these taxis kind of drive around in front of the haram. And the woman is standing there. He sees her. This is a few months ago, brothers and sisters. This isn't 100 years ago. This isn't something I read from the books. This is, we know these people. She's talking to one taxi cab. The taxi cab leaves. Another taxi cab comes. She's talking to someone in there. And he leaves. And then he comes up to her, says, Salamu alaikum. And she says, even you? Even people like you guys are going to come and ask me things like this? I don't need to go much more into depth. Those who know. And he says, I just said Salamu alaikum. What did I do? What did I walk into? She says, no, it's because of people like you that look like you. He's like, I haven't done anything. I just offered you salam. It's because of you that I can't afford my rent. It's because of you that I can't buy medicine for my mother. It's because of you, X, Y, and Z. He says, why don't you try asking for help from him, meaning Imam? She says, if he wanted to help me, he would, but he doesn't want to help me. Okay, pretty strong language. He says, where do you live? She says, I live about an hour away from here. He says, will you take me to your home? She says, fine, it's not like I had any, luck over here, business over here. Fine, I'll take you. Takes him to 1 hour away to her village. And he goes, it's this apartment, this condominium, he has to go down steep stairs to go to the house. There he finds a young daughter, a mother, haram, all girls who are living here, not a man to protect them. So what does he do? He says, okay, tell me, I'm going to start taking notes. What medicines does your mother need? What medicines, do you need? This poor girl, she's just sitting over here. She has nothing to do. She's just sitting in front of this broken air conditioner and it's hot. So, okay, number one, we need to get an AC repairman. Number two, you need groceries. Number three, you need medicine. Number four, we need some toys for this young girl. He goes and takes some few notes. He goes to the grocery, goes do some groceries. He goes and gets so much back. He comes and brings it back for her. And he gives some cash. He says, how much do you need? How much are you behind on rent? She says, 2 months, 3 months rent, whatever it is. So he goes and pays that off for her. He says, here's rent for this month and next month. She says, okay, but thanks, but she's not really happy. Why? Because after next month, he's not going to be here and she's going to be in what situation? The same exact situation all over again. So all you've done is kind of delay the inevitable. But it's going to happen. He says, no, I have another thing that I want to do for you. Okay, 1 hour ride all the way back to Mashhad now. Now that she's got a little bit of sukoon over here at home, let's take her back to Imam Rida. Because she still said something that hurt this alim ad-din's heart, that if Imam Rida wanted to help, he would have. So he wants to show that this is Imam Rida, not me. What does he do? He goes to one of his contacts, one of the heads of the departments of the shrine of Imam Rida alayhi salam. Goes to him and says, is there anything that we can go and give this poor sister? He goes and explains, without sacrificing her dignity, goes and explains that she is in need and she has a family. She lives an hour away from here. Anything, even a janitor, because the janitors even of the Imam Khuddam, they're respected among society, there's good pay. He says, I'm not so sure. Let me go and ask the other department heads. Goes and asks the head of IT. Because of course in all of the haram of the imams, there are cameras. Right? There's tech going on. He goes and asks the director of IT, is there? He says, yes, actually about a week ago or something, one of the high-ranking computer specialist technicians retired, and we need someone. I don't know if I would love to give her this job, but at the end of the day, we need someone who's qualified. But we'll give her an interview, so that she has some hopes. Inshallah, she can come back another day when there's maybe another opening. Says, okay. Afwan, if we can close the door over there. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. He says maybe she can come back another day to the shrine when maybe there's a different opening, but we'll, out of respect for you, we will go and give her a interview. They go and take her interview. What's the department again, brothers and sisters? IT. And they go and interview this young sister, and they ask her, well, can you tell us a little bit about your credentials? She says, well, I have 3 degrees in computer science, 2 masters and a PhD. Our friend goes and asks her, you didn't want to go and tell me this before, that you're so well qualified? But unfortunately, brothers and sisters, this is the plight of our brothers and sisters in Iran, where even people who are well qualified, they're even in hard times. The director of IT is now very, very impressed. Okay, well, can you tell us more? What's your background? What's your job history? Because she doesn't exactly have a resume. If she's going on the roundabout near the shrine of Imam Rida, she's not exactly carrying her resume around with her, right? So she goes and says, oh, well, I work for this company. I used to be working for this company, but then, times got tough. My husband divorced me, and now, unfortunately, I'm just falling behind on rent. He says, okay, enough of this interview. Let's go now to the control station, where all of the cameras, where you can control them and everything from, for the shrine. She goes and looks at the system. She's like, that's out of date. This is how you work this. This is a little bit misaligned. This is this. This is that. This what? Maulana, you've brought someone who is better than the previous person we've had employed over here. Now, as employers want to, they try to keep their cards a little bit close. Okay, we'll see. But no, we're going to make a decision for her today. This all happened in the span of 12 hours, brothers and sisters. From 8 a.m. when he was giving out money on the streets, to now he's negotiating on behalf of this sister. What's happening now? They're waiting in the waiting room, and these guys come out and they say, would she be amenable, would she be okay if we gave her a written job offer right now with 1 million riyals a month? Says, 1 million riyals? Are you serious? 1 million riyals is not going to do anything for her. So, at the end of the day, the conversation, the negotiation goes back and forth. Brothers and sisters, she now has a apartment closer to the haram of Imam Rida alayhi salam, and the new dorms that are being built for the staff of Imam Rida, she's going to have a flat over there. I think the square footage is something like around 3,000 square feet, which is pretty good compared to where she was living before, and she's going to be getting 24 million riyals a month. But that's not where the story ends. Comes back 2 days later, now that she has a job. 2 days later. Because of course, he has to eventually leave the country as well, right? Comes back 2 days later and finds out that this sister has been trying to reach him, but she doesn't have his number. He gave the number to her, said, Maulana, I want you to recite my aqd. Aqd, what are you talking about? Well, it turns out that there's a youth over here who's also working at the haram of Imam Rida alayhi salam, and we talked, the families talked, he's very, very good. If you want, you can go and question him yourself. She said, no, I mean, if he's good, I trust you. I said, well, okay, will you go and give the nikah? Now, brothers and sisters, both of these are workers at the shrine of Imam Rida. When workers get married, the shrine, kind of gives on their own. They'll go and cater the food. They'll go and put the bouquets of flowers. Grand names of scholars will come and attend the wedding. And our dear friend was reciting the nikah. When he goes back to the initial friend at the shrine of Imam Rida alayhi salam, he says, this is the entire story of what happened. He said, we will write this down in the official records of miracles that are associated with the shrine. He takes a COVID test the next day. How many days has it been now? Maybe like 4 days or something. Comes back negative. He says, Allah gave me COVID because I had a mission to do, and Allah took away my COVID when it was time for me to go. Gets on the plane, deletes her number. He says, the Imam has done his work. Alhamdulillah, I was the conduit. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So when we come now back to our discussion of how is the Imam of our time going to avenge Imam al-Hussein, it's because he's going to completely change the mindset, brothers and sisters, of the people, such that there is no more chance for people to do dhulm in the world. And it's not like we're blaming any particular official or politician or government or anything for this sister's plight. But at the same time, injustice is injustice. She is, or was, not able to survive because of someone else who took advantage of a situation that they shouldn't have. When the Imam comes, and when Rasulullah says, he will يَمْلَأُ الْأَرْضُ بِالْقِسْطِ كَمَا يَمْلَأُهَا بِالْجَوْرِ. He says, just as it once was filled with injustice, just as it once was filled with oppression, one day my son, the Mhadi, will go and fill it with justice. And this is how the macro avenging of Imam al-Hussein will be done. Brothers and sisters, right now in these nights, you probably see a black flag on the qubba of Imam al-Hussein, the dome of Imam al-Hussein. But the rest of the time, what color is the flag of Imam al-Hussein? Red. Why are there not red flags on Amir al-Mu'mineen's dome? Why isn't there a red flag on Ali ibn Musa Rida's dome? Why isn't there a red flag in Samarra? Why is it only Imam al-Hussein? Because in Arab culture, what the red flag on top of a grave signifies is that this person was killed and they have still not been avenged. So next time, inshallah, and inshallah we all get to go together soon to ziyarah of Abi Abdullah al-Hussein. Next time when we go, and if there's a red flag, let that be a reminder that there is still someone who is yet to come who will go and take revenge for his grandfather. Indeed, we find a hadith from Abu Ja'far al-Imam al-Baqir, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. And we find that this is found in the book of Irshad by Sheikh al-Mufid, this hadith from Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam. And this will be the speech which we have written in our sources. I'm about to read to you the speech, short speech, that Sahib al-Asri wa Zaman will read when he is bayn al-Rukni wal-Maqam, when he is between the Rukn al-Yamani of the Kaaba and the Maqam Ibrahim. These are the words of your 12th Imam, inshallah. What does the Imam say? He says, Abu Ja'far al-Baqir alayhi salam will say, إذا ظهر القائم آل محمد صلوا عليه بأعلى أصواتكم. قام بين الركن والمقام وينادي بنداءات خمسة. بنداءات خمسة. الأول: ألا يا أهل العالم أنا الإمام القائم. الثاني: ألا يا أهل العالم أنا الصمصام المنتقم. الثالث: ألا يا أهل العالم إن جدي الحسين قتلوه عطشانا. الرابع: ألا يا أهل العالم إن جدي الحسين عليه السلام طرحوه عريانا. الخامس: ألا يا أهل العالم إن جدي الحسين سحقوه عدوانا. What does this mean? Sahib al-Zaman will say, I'll translate a few of them, the one that is relevant to our discussion tonight. What does Sahib al-Zaman say? He says, O nations of the world, I am the Imam who rises. O people of all nations, I am the one who will rise for revenge. O people of the nations, my grandfather Hussein was killed thirsty on the plains of Karbala. O people of all nations, my grandfather Hussein was left without clothes. He was left naked. And then you find in our riwayat that Imam Sahib al-Zaman will go from Mecca to Karbala. And there we see a very heartbreaking scene. And what is that? The scene is this. He goes into the dharih of Imam al-Hussein, or actually into the Sardab, and he will go into the grave of Imam al-Hussein, because who is buried on the chest of Imam al-Hussein? There's a 6-month-old infant who Imam al-Hussein told Imam Zain al-Abidin that put the infant on my chest, because the pain of that tragedy still haunts me to this day. Sahib al-Asri wa Zaman will go to Karbala and take out the body of this 6-month-old infant, and he will ask the people of all nations, with all cameras of the world pointing towards him, what was the sin of this poor child? Why was he killed? You find that in the Maqtal, the Imam has a few of his wives there. One of those wives is named Rabab. If we could dim the lights a little bit. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. One of those mothers, brothers and sisters, had 2 children there at Karbala. One of them was Ruqayya. One of them was Ali al-Asghar, also known as Abdullah al-Radi'. It's said that when Rabab was on the 9th of Muharram, she said, "Oh my son Ali al-Asghar, I know how the people think. They will blame me if you do not help your father. They will say that there was something wrong with me. Therefore, oh Ali, if your father needs help, if you find him alone, try your best and help him." You find that when all of the people have died, Imam al-Hussein goes out to the plains of Karbala, and he looks to his yameen and he looks to his shimal, to his right and his left, and he calls out, "Burair, Habib, Zuhair, what is wrong with you that I call you but you do not answer me? Or is it that your heads have been separated and you are unable to answer anymore?" By this time, The bodies of Ali and Al-Akbar and Al-Qasim have been brought back to the tent. And Abu Fadl al-Abbas is lying somewhere near the Furat. Your Imam is ghareeb, mazloom, atshan. He comes to his ladies in the tents and says, bring all of the women closer to me. I want to bid my farewell to them. But Imam al-Hussein cannot take it because he sees his sister Zainab crying. He says, Zainab, your brother has not even left. Why are you crying? She says, your young son Ali has become so thirsty that he's become so restless in his cradle. He's gone and flapped so much, he's ejected himself out of the cradle. He's on the floor now. I had to see that. She says, I don't know what to go and tell this poor mother. How much longer are we going to have to wait for water? Now we don't even have Abbas. What am I supposed to go and tell her, Ya Abu Abdullah? He says, bring the baby to me. Maybe the enemies will give him some water. But here we see something that the poets tell us, that a small girl tugs at the aba of Imam al-Hussein, Ruqayya, small 3 or 4-year-old girl. She says, Baba, where are you taking my brother? If there's any water, can I come? He says, let me see if there's water. Inshallah, I'll come back and he will be quenched. He allows Ruqayya her final salams to Ali and Al-Asghar, and then he wraps up his baby and swaddles him in his arm. And he takes him into the battlefield. The battlefield where all of these ulama and heroes and members of Al Muhammad have been slain. He comes with this, and one of the enemies of Allah is asked later by Al-Mukhtar, was there a moment when all of, or at least some part of Yazid's army cried? Was there anything that touched their hearts about what they saw that day? Or was it just a massacre, a genocide to them? He says, no, Ya Mukhtar. There was a moment where they all had shamefully turned away. When Hussein brought his baby out, Harmala then narrates, also from Mukhtar, we find out that Harmala was asked, Harmala, what did you do on that day? He said, I fired 3 arrows. Each one of them tore the heart of Zahra into pieces. The first of those arrows I sent into the mouth of Abi Abdullah al-Hussein while he was on his horse, and this knocked him down onto the plains of Karbala. He says, what was the second arrow? He says, the second arrow went into the eye of Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas. Brothers and sisters, afterwards, when the arrow went into the bag of water and it started to leak, how was Abu Fadl al-Abbas supposed to cry with an arrow in his eye? He says, the final arrow is the one that pains me the most. Hussein had brought out his 6-month-old infant. Sabr ya Shia al-Muhammad, sabr. for what I'm about to recite to you. He says, we thought he had brought out the Quran. It was so wrapped tightly. But then he uncovered the blessed face of his 6-month-old infant, Ali al-Asghar. And he addressed us and he said, Ya Shi'ata al-Abu Sufyan, Atshana Ummah. His mother is thirsty. She does not have any milk left to go and give this small child of mine. That wasn't enough for the enemies of Allah. They were still hard-hearted. What does Harmala say is what broke all of their hearts? It's when some of them went a little closer to see if it's a baby, and the baby lets out its tongue to see if there's any moisture in the air, and it keeps on opening its lips and closing its lips like a fish out of water. At this point, the army of Umar ibn Sa'd was divided into 2 camps. One of them remembered the kids that they had at home, and they said, yes, feed the baby, give some water to him. Imam al-Hussein then tries to interject. He says, if you think that I will be dishonest with the water, if you think I will take some water, take the baby yourself, give him some water, return him back to me. The other side of the army of Umar ibn Sa'd, what do they have to say? They say, no, none of the Qawm al-Zalimin will ever taste any moisture, no water for them. Let the first taste of this wretched family of transgressors, let them go to hell. Let them go and drink from this pool of water in hell. At this moment, Umar ibn Sa'd turns to Harmala ibn Kahil and he says, Ya Harmala, help the people out in their debate. He looks at him and he says, what do you want me to do? Kill the baby. This small piece of cloth is flapping around. Take your shot when you see the neck of this young child. Stop the debate, otherwise if people leave us and they have more supporters, this war will never end. End their debate, Ya Harmala. Here we see one of the reciters in Karbala. I don't know if he's citing a poet or if he's citing history, but take it all of the same. Harmala then says that I raised the arrow and then I dropped it. And then I raised the arrow and then I dropped it. And then I raised the arrow a 3rd time and I dropped it. And Umar ibn Sa'd is watching me and he says, Harmala, what is wrong with you? He says, I see a lady in black every time that I pull up the arrow, but I don't see her when I put down the arrow. And she says, Harmala, do you not have kids of your own? Why are you so intent about snuffing out the light of Al-Muhammad? Umar ibn Sa'd then says, aim, and then I will cover your eyes, and then launch your arrow. When he launches this arrow, brothers and sisters, this arrow is not an ordinary arrow. This arrow has got 3 heads on it. This arrow is what Harmala used to use to sacrifice camels with thick necks. This is the arrow that he didn't use with any of the warriors of Karbala. He uses on the final soldier of Imam al-Hussein, a 6-month-old baby. Ask yourself how courageous these men are if they need to resort to these kinds of tactics. One of the ulama says something I don't know how you'll be able to handle it. I don't know how I'll be able to recite it. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. He says, this arrow was so big, and the neck of Asghar was so small, that upon the point of impact, Ali al-Asghar did not know whether to smile or whether to cry. Brothers and sisters, listen to your kids over there on the other side. Listen to these small kids, and they're crying. And ask yourself, are they going to be killed with an arrow that is too big for them, that has 3 piercing edges? How did Imam al-Hussein have the energy to keep him after losing everybody? Keep him in his arms, knowing what they will do next. He launches the arrow, and Shia of Al Muhammad, from one ear to the other ear, the arrow comes out of the head of Ali al-Asghar. The middle arrow of this 3-pronged arrow hits the bicep and the arm of Imam al-Hussein. This small baby is now pinned to the arm of his father, and his expression says it all. He's saying, Ya Abata, even I gave everything I had for you, Ya Imam. I can almost hear Ar-Radud Basim al-Karbala'i's words coming into my head. Ma dhanbu tifli. What was the sin of this poor baby? If the older people is what you are blaming for the sins against Yazid, what is the crime of this young baby? He just wanted to live a little bit. He just wanted to get some water. Now the head of this young baby is dangling lifeless. And Imam al-Hussein is cupping his hand underneath, and the blood is filling up the hand of Aba Abdullah, this poor innocent infant. He throws it up to the heavens. Brothers and sisters, history records not a single drop was taken back. What happens in the alam al-ghayb? Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alih takes the blood of this beautiful grandson and takes it to Allah. He goes with this complaint to Allah. What did my Hussein's son Ali, what did he do to deserve this? Imam al-Hussein then says, Ya Allah, Allahumma aqbal hadha al-qurban. Oh Allah, accept from us this sacrifice. If this is what makes you happy, then take from me until you are happy. He goes back, and Zainab comes with Ruqayya. And they ask, did the baby get some water at least? He says, عَظَّمَ اللَّهُ لَكُ الْأَجْرِ. My grandfather, Rasulullah, has just quenched his thirst in Jannah. Zainab takes the baby crying, but she's unsure. What should I tell the mother of this child? She thought that my milk is not enough for this child to be of some help. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. وَسَيَعْلَمُ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا أَيَّ مُنْقَلَبٍ يَنْقَلِبُونَ وَالْعَاقِبَةُ لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. Brothers and sisters, in such heavy nights, do not have any doubt about your hajat. Do not have any doubt about your du'as. If such du'as of People in Iran who are in such dire times are being answered by Imam Rida, and there isn't even an event of Imam Rida. You think Imam al-Hussein will turn away all of you, the lovers of Imam al-Hussein who are here to commemorate him, to share in his grief for his poor child? La wallah. Imam al-Hussein will take your hajat to Allah, and Allah will take every single hajat seriously. All of your marid, all of your marhumeen, all of your children, your parents, everybody. These are the moments that you've been waiting for an entire year. Ya Shia Aba Abdullah, recite with me that blessed ayah 5 times. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء Last time, أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء. اللهم إنا نسألك وندعوك باسمك العظيم الأعظم الأعز الأكرم. 10 times, brothers and sisters. Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah.